My name is Damien, and I am the monster in her story. Cursed, bound, a villain playing a part. My mission, broadcast into my skull by a voice I call the system, is to systematically break the sweet, innocent princess I am sworn to protect. At the state banquet, I accidentally spilled wine on her gown. Then, in front of the entire court, I knelt to clean it. My fingers unintentionally brushed against her calf. She flinched, her face flushing a shade of crimson that could stop a heart. The system chimed its approval, but only I knew the truth. In the spot I wiped clean, a sliver of steel lay hidden, an assassin's blade, tipped with a fast-acting neurotoxin. To save her, I would later take a killing blow meant for her, falling into a 13-year slumber. When I woke, the empire was ash, and from it, my little princess had risen as a ruthless, iron-willed empress. She unbuckled my armor, piece by piece, only to fasten a magnificent golden chain around my neck. The other end she secured to the arm of her throne. "My knight," she whispered, her voice a silken thread. "You always did enjoy kneeling at my feet. From now on, this is the only place you'll ever be." The grand ballroom glittered, a galaxy of crystal chandeliers and clinking glasses. I, Damien, youngest knight captain of the Imperial Guard, stood at my post behind Princess Alara, bored out of my mind. She was dressed in a cloud of white lace, looking as fragile as a wildflower in a storm. A cold, digital voice echoed in my skull, devoid of all emotion. System directive: publicly humiliate Princess Alara at the state banquet. Reward: 3-hour reprieve from all pain. Penalty: level 10 bioelectric shock. Another one of these sadistic little tasks. I suppressed a surge of irritation, my eyes scanning the crowd. My gaze locked onto a man in the delegation from the neighboring kingdom of Valoria, a hawk-nosed courtier whose predatory stare lingered on Alara for a fraction of a second too long. A flicker of murderous intent. On the hilt of a ceremonial sword, I spotted the faint etching of an iris flower. That was all I needed. I picked up a glass of Cabernet and moved toward Alara. As she turned, I let my wrist falter. A splash. The deep red wine bloomed across her pristine white skirt like a violent, ugly flower. Alara gasped, her face draining of all color. The nobles around us turned, their expressions a mixture of shock, contempt, and poorly concealed glee. The whispers started, a low buzz of insects. "My God, isn't that Captain Damien? How could he be so clumsy? The princess is already out of favor with the king. This is just mortifying." Alara clutched her dress, her eyes welling up. She looked like a lost kitten, cornered and terrified. Across the room, Prince Arthur of Valoria puffed out his chest, the perfect white knight preparing to swoop in and save the day. I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. I moved first, dropping to one knee before her with a precision that could have been pulled from a military textbook. The court fell silent, stunned. I produced a clean, white silk handkerchief from my coat. "Your Highness, you've soiled your dress." My voice was just loud enough to carry, calm and deliberate. "As your sworn knight, you must forgive my presumption." I bowed my head, my heavy captain's cloak fanning out, perfectly shielding my actions from prying eyes. All they could see was the back of a man committing an act of profound humility or profound disrespect. In the shadows of my cloak, I began to dab at the wine stain on her skirt. She was frozen solid, her breath hitched in her throat. My fingers, separated from her skin only by a thin layer of silk, deliberately grazed the delicate line of her calf. She shuddered, a choked little whimper escaping her lips. My fingertips traced a path upward, expertly snagging a paper-thin blade tucked into the deep folds of her dress. The metal caught the light, glinting with a faint, sickly green hue. The poison. I wrapped the blade in the handkerchief, clenching it tightly in my palm. At the same time, I leaned close, my lips brushing her ear. "Your Highness," I murmured, my voice a ghost only she could hear. "Stand tall. Don't let your enemies see you break." Her tear-filled eyes shot up to meet mine, wide with confusion and hurt. I offered no explanation. I simply rose, took one step back, and crushed the handkerchief and the blade in my fist with unnatural force, the metal and silk turning to dust within my glove. Then I executed a flawless ceremonial bow. My apologies for the offense, Your Highness. The system's voice returned, cold and satisfied. Directive complete. Reward dispersed. But I felt no relief. I could already feel the king's furious gaze burning into the back of my neck. The king's dungeons were as cold and damp as I expected. It was a welcome respite. I needed a quiet place to ensure no trace of the poison remained on my gear. I leaned against the stone wall, closing my eyes. Late that night, a faint scraping sound came from the cell door. Alara's small silhouette appeared, a basket in one hand and a bottle of antiseptic in the other. She crept inside, placing the items on the dirty floor. You didn't do it on purpose, did you? Her voice was soft, trembling, but held a core of surprising certainty. I opened my eyes. In the darkness, her own were luminous. System directive initiated. Command Alara to tend to your wounds. Conclude by stating, you are only fit to be my servant. Reward, infusion of master-level swordsmanship techniques. Penalty, agonizing spiritual immolation. A wave of pure rage washed over me. I shot to my feet, staring into her clear eyes, forcing the fury down. I let out a cold, bitter laugh and roughly tore open my tunic. A road map of scars, old and new, crisscrossed the muscles of my chest and abdomen, looking grotesque in the thin moonlight. Get over here. She flinched back like a startled rabbit. I had no patience for this game. I closed the distance in a single step and grabbed her slender wrist. It was so fine, so fragile, I was terrified of using too much force. I pressed a clean cloth and the bottle of antiseptic into her hand. My voice was ice. What are you waiting for, Your Highness? Can't you even handle a simple task like this? Tears welled in her eyes, her hands shaking uncontrollably, but she obeyed. She began to clean a gash on my back. The cool liquid was a relief against my skin, but a moment later, a hot tear fell on my shoulder blade, scalding me worse than any fire. A sharp pain, entirely my own, lanced through my chest. The system's required line echoed in my mind like a curse. I spun around, seizing her chin in my hand and forcing her to look at me. Remember this. These scratches are nothing. My voice was hard, cruel. You're weak. So weak you can't even see who's trying to kill you. She started sobbing, her small shoulders shaking. A princess like you is only fit to be a servant, cleaning my wounds. The system's chime of completion rang out. The rage inside me peaked. I lowered my voice, speaking so fast it was almost a blur, a secret share between us. The man who wants you dead is the envoy who presented you with flowers this afternoon. His cuff links have the same iris pattern as the dagger's hilt. Her crying stopped abruptly. She stared, her tear-streaked face a mask of shock and confusion. I released her and pulled a small, silver token from my tunic, my family's signet, a wolf's head carved in relief. I pressed it into her palm. Take this. The metal was cold against her skin. Next time I'm not there, crush it. Inside was a microalchemical charge, something I'd spent my entire savings on. It packed enough of a punch to blow a hole in a castle wall, enough to give her an escape route from anything. She just stared at me, too stunned to react. I couldn't stay any longer. Get out, I snarled, turning my back on her. I'm tired of looking at you. She clutched the signet and left, looking back every few steps. She had no idea that I had other plans in motion, that this was far from my last move. The Royal Preserve. A crisp autumn day, perfect for the annual hunt. The nobles were in high spirits. Prince Arthur of Valoria was in full peacock mode, fawning over Alara. He selected the lightest bough for her, brought her the most docile mare. The ladies of the court sighed with envy, their jealous glances like daggers in Alara's back. She looked uncomfortable but remained polite. System directive. Cause Alara's horse to bolt, resulting in a fall and injury. You will then personally tear her sleeve to bandage the wound. My face remained a stone mask. My eyes were fixed on an unassuming squire standing behind Prince Arthur. I watched as the man, under the guise of checking the saddle, smeared a thick grease onto the buckle of Alara's saddle strap. It was a classic underhanded trick. The strap would loosen and slip during a hard gallop. A cheap ploy to set up a heroic rescue. I said nothing. Alara, with Arthur's guidance, clumsily urged her horse into a canter, chasing a white fawn that had wandered from the woods. She picked up speed. It was time. I didn't wait for Arthur's plan to unfold. With a flick of my wrist, a small pebble shot from my fingers, silent and invisible. It struck the mare's flank with pinpoint accuracy. The horse screamed, rearing violently. Alara cried out as she was thrown from the saddle. Arthur's face paled. He spurred his horse forward, ready to play the hero. Too late. A silver and black blur moved faster. I had already calculated her trajectory, her velocity, the exact moment of impact. My own stallion thundered across the field, and just before she hit the ground, I leaned down, scooping her small, pliant body into my arms. We galloped for another 50 yards before I reined my horse to a halt. I held her securely, her cheek pressed against the cold steel of my breastplate, where she could surely feel the steady, powerful beat of my heart. She was trembling, breathless, limp in my embrace. The world seemed to fall silent around us. I looked down. Her arm was scraped and bleeding, cut by a low-hanging branch during her fall. The mission, I had to complete it. "Forgive me, Your Highness," I murmured, my voice low and rough against her ear. Then, under the furious glare of Prince Arthur and the entire royal court, I held her with one arm and deliberately took hold of the sleeve of her expensive riding habit with the other. Ryop, the fine fabric tore away, exposing the long, bloody gash on her arm and the smooth, pale curve of her shoulder. My fingers accidentally brushed against her skin. My warm breath ghosted over her earlobe. She blushed to the roots of her hair, looking as if she might faint from sheer mortification. I took out my field dressing kit and began to methodically clean and bandage the wound. By the time I finished, Arthur had arrived, his face a mask of faux outrage. He pointed an accusing finger at me. "You there? Captain, why weren't you protecting the princess?" I finished tying the bandage and finally looked up at him, my eyes cold as death. I held up the object I'd plucked from her saddle as I caught her, the greased buckle. "Your Highness, perhaps that's a question you should be asking your squire," I said, tossing the buckle at his feet, and not me. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the crowd. Arthur's face turned a shade of mottled purple. In my arms, I felt Alara stiffen. She looked up, not at Arthur, but at my face. And for the first time, the look in her eyes wasn't fear. It was something else entirely. Hashtag 4 after the incident at the hunt. Something shifted in Alara. She was no longer afraid of me. In fact, she began finding excuses to be near me, bringing me water, offering me pastries from the royal kitchen, or simply sitting on a small stool near the colonnade where I stood guard, reading a book in silence. She was like a stray cat, slowly deciding to trust. Tonight, the moon was a silver coin in a velvet sky. I was on my usual patrol route by the palace lake when I heard the rustle of her dress behind me. The wind rippled across the water, shattering the moonlight into 1,000 pieces. She stood there for a long time before finally gathering her courage. She brought her hands out from behind her back, offering me something. It was a small, hand-woven charm made of red silk thread. The stitches were clumsy, the knotwork uneven, but it was clearly made with painstaking care. "Damien, thank you." Her voice was as soft as a feather, laced with a young woman's shyness. "I know you're not what you pretend to be." I took the charm. It was still warm from her hands. A current of warmth, something I hadn't felt in years, spread from my palm through my entire body. It was the first act of genuine, untainted kindness I had received since being ripped from my own world and thrown into this one. I closed my fist around it. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder what life might be like without the system with her. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Alert! Host has developed anomalous emotional attachment to the target. Initiating final protocol. Broken wings. The system's voice was a physical blow, a shard of ice rammed into my brain. The warmth, the fantasy, it all evaporated. 3 days hence, at Princess Alara's rite of ascension, you will collaborate with insurgent forces to create a diversion. You will then personally strike Alara's right shoulder with a provided Viper's Kiss dagger, causing permanent, crippling injury. Reward: extraction from this narrative. Return to your reality. Penalty: immediate cerebral termination. Soul data will be archived and indefinitely contained. My blood ran cold. The system continued, projecting the image of a wicked, curved dagger into my mind, complete with a detailed schematic of its venom. The poison wasn't lethal. It would just destroy the nerves in her arm, leaving it paralyzed forever. She would never be able to paint again, never be able to weave another clumsy, heartfelt charm like the one I held in my hand. It would destroy the one small source of joy she had in this cold, gilded cage of a palace. I looked at the girl smiling shyly before me, completely unaware that fate, or rather a cruel, indifferent program, had just signed a warrant for her betrayal. She was looking at me with hope, and I was the executioner tasked with dragging her into the abyss. Why? Why did some cold, unfeeling algorithm get to decide her fate? Our fate? For the first time, a clear, murderous rage was directed not at my circumstances, but at the voice in my head. I stared at Alara, my expression so intense that her smile faltered. Damien, 3 days. I had 3 days to make a choice. Mutilate her and crawl back to a reality I no longer cared for, or protect her and face oblivion. It wasn't a choice at all. Hashtag, 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 5. The final countdown had begun. For the last 3 days of my life, I dropped the mask. I went to General Valerius, the grizzled commander of the city watch and one of the few men in the capital still loyal to the old crown. General, I have a map of a potential insurgent infiltration route for the Rite of Ascension. I spread the parchment on his desk. On it, I'd marked the city's defensive blind spots and the secret tunnels I knew the rebels would use. The old general's eyes widened. Captain Damien, where did you get this? A premonition, I said calmly, from a man who doesn't expect to see another sunrise. Next, I found Alara. She was in the gardens, fumbling with a bow, unable to draw the string back properly. I walked up behind her, and for the first time, I didn't offer a sarcastic barb. I covered her hands with mine, correcting her stance. Relax your shoulders. Feel the wind. My chest was flush against her back. She went completely still, her cheeks turning a deep shade of rose. I guided her arms, helping her pull the bowstring taut. Release. Thwomp. The arrow flew true, striking the bullseye. Alara spun around, her eyes sparkling. I did it. Damien, I did it. I watched her smile, and my heart ached with a terrible, sweet finality. For the rest of our time, I snuck her out of the palace. We became, for one perfect day, a normal couple. I bought her the fried dough pastry from the South Market vendor she'd always talked about, and she closed her eyes in bliss at the sweet, cinnamony taste. We watched street performers juggle fire, and she clapped with childlike delight. I bought her a simple wooden pin for her hair, and she immediately wore it as if it were a crown jewel. On the last night, I placed a necklace around her throat. The pendant was a single, flawless lightstone, pulsing with a soft, internal luminescence. It will protect you, I told her. In truth, I had poured nearly all my life force, all my savings, into enchanting it. It held enough power to stop a killing blow, and maybe, just maybe, to shelter a soul on the brink of death. Alara was radiant. She thought I was finally returning her affections. Blushing, she stood on her toes and whispered in my ear, Damien, after the ceremony, will you be my first dance? My throat was tight, the words caught in my chest. I looked into her hopeful eyes and managed a nod. Yes. That night, I stood guard outside her door for the last time. She poked her head out the window, waving. Good night, my knight. Good night, my princess, I answered in my heart. And goodbye. In my own quarters, I polished my longsword until it shone like a mirror, reflecting my own calm, resolute face. I had made my choice. I would refuse the mission. Let the system do its worst. I would protect her until my last breath. The bells for the Rite of Ascension were about to ring, and I was ready to die. Hashtag, 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 6. The Grand Cathedral was a place of solemn majesty. Alara, dressed in a simple white robe, stood before the high altar, ready to receive the Archbishop's blessing. In my head, the system's countdown was a frantic scream. 10, 9, 8. I stood behind her, my hand on my sword, every muscle in my body coiled tight. Just as the Archbishop raised his ceremonial staff, all hell broke loose. Boom! The massive stained glass windows of the cathedral exploded inward, shattered by a blast of raw magical energy. Black-clad soldiers, the rebels, poured through the openings like a tide of vipers. The sanctuary erupted into chaos. Nobles screamed and fled. The royal guard charged forward, and the sacred space filled with the shriek of steel and the cries of the dying. 3, 2, 1. Final directive failed. Initiating host termination. The system's voice cut out. I braced for the agony. Nothing happened. I froze. What? Just then, a figure moved like a wraith through the fighting, appearing directly behind Alara. It was the hawk-nosed Valerian courtier, the rebel leader. He raised a dagger high, its blade shimmering with that same sickly green poison. It was the exact dagger from the system's projection. In a flash of cold clarity, I understood. The mission, the collaboration with the rebels, it was all a setup. The system knew the attack was coming. It wasn't ordering me to participate. It was trying to frame me for it. Alara, look out! I roared, my sword clearing its scabbard in a silvery arc. I lunged, a blur of motion. My blade sang, and the rebel leader's head flew from his shoulders. But I had no time to recover. Across the dais, the enemy's lead sorcerer completed his incantation. A bolt of pure necrotic energy, an annihilation arrow, tore through the air with a horrifying shriek aimed directly at Alara's heart. It was an inescapable death sentence. Too fast. No time to parry, no time to dodge. My mind went blank. My body acted on pure instinct. Without a shred of hesitation, I spun around and threw my arms open, pulling Alara into a desperate embrace, shielding her small body with my own. I took the full force of the black arrow in the center of my back. Warning. Host has catastrophically deviated from narrative protocol. Safety interlocks disengaged. Initiating final, unrestrained termination. The system's voice shrieked in my skull with a new, panicked intensity. Pain. A pain beyond comprehension, as if my very soul was being ripped apart. I felt my life force draining away like water from a sieve. As my vision tunneled to black, the lightstone on Alara's chest flared with a blinding, divine light. It formed a protective barrier around her, but also seemed to draw the annihilation arrow's dark energy deeper into me, turning my body into a conduit for its catastrophic power. I coughed, a spray of blood splattering across her white robes. My legs gave out, and I collapsed into her arms. The last thing I saw was my own pale face reflected in her beautiful eyes that were no longer just afraid, but filled with a terrifying, world-burning madness. Then, only darkness. Hashtag, 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 7 in eternity, or a moment later, I opened my eyes. The ceiling above me was an ornate, unfamiliar fresco of gold leaf constellations. The air smelled of incense and sterile, magical reagents that left me feeling groggy. I tried to sit up and discovered I had all the structural integrity of a jellyfish. Across the room, a tall woman in a black and gold imperial uniform stood with her back to me, her posture as sharp and unforgiving as a drawn sword. The sheer force of her presence was suffocating. My throat was sandpaper. Water, I rasped. The woman's shoulders went rigid. She turned, slowly. A face that was both intimately familiar and terrifyingly strange looked back at me. It was Alara, but not. The soft lines of youth had hardened into the sharp, breathtaking beauty of a queen. The doe eyes I remembered were gone, replaced by glacial pools of ice, deep and dark, radiating a chilling, obsessive power. She walked to the bedside and poured me a glass of water herself, her movements infused with an unshakable, imperial grace. I drank greedily. Ow! I started, my voice still a wreck. How long was I asleep? She leaned over me, her cool fingertips tracing the line of my jaw. Her gaze was intense, as if she were memorizing a face she feared might vanish. 13 years, my knight, she said. Her voice was a soft murmur, the kind of tone a lover might use, or a god passing judgment. 13 years. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. I'd been dead. No, sleeping for 13 years? As if reading my mind, a flicker of something ancient and painful crossed her features before being buried again under layers of ice. She began to speak, her voice a calm, detached monotone. After I took the arrow, I fell into a state of magical stasis, indistinguishable from death. In the chaos of the coup, clutching my body, she had somehow activated the Lightstone amulet. Its power shielded her and, miraculously, tethered the last shred of my soul to my body. With the help of the loyalist General Valerius, she fought her way out of the fallen capital, taking my body with her. The 13 years that followed were a crucible of blood and fire. Using my martyrdom as her banner and vengeance as her fuel, she rallied the old guard, crushed the rebellion, and systematically eliminated every one of her rivals. The gentle princess, I knew, had clawed her way up a mountain of corpses to become the first empress in the nation's history. She had bent the entire empire's resources, its mages, its scholars, its alchemists, to a single task: finding a way to bring me back. They all told me you were gone forever, that your soul had shattered. They told me to let you go. She looked down at me, and in the depths of her eyes, I saw a terrifying, bottomless obsession. I told them if I couldn't have you back, I would burn the entire continent to the ground and make it your funeral pyre. And she had succeeded, at an unimaginable cost. I waited for you for 13 years, Damien. Her fingers tightened on my neck, a touch that was both a caress and a claim. And now you're awake. Now you're mine. I stared up at this stranger wearing the face of the girl I had died for, and a profound chill, colder than any dungeon, settled deep in my bones. What had she become in those 13 years? How had my sweet, fragile princess warped into this monster? My body healed at an astonishing rate, thanks to the Empress's endless supply of miraculous elixirs. But one question kept nagging at me. The system. What happened to it? Did it terminate me? Why was I still here? I tried reaching out with my thoughts. System? Hello? Anybody there? Silence. A profound, absolute quiet in the space it used to occupy. Alara, who was changing a dressing on my arm, paused. She looked up, her gaze so perceptive it felt like she was peering directly into my soul. A small, cold smile touched her lips. Are you looking for that thing that used to control you? A jolt went through me. How could she know? She set down medical supplies and took my hand. Her skin was cool, her grip firm. Come with me. She led me down a long, guarded corridor to a sealed chamber. With a wave of her hand, the heavy, rune-etched stone door slid open. In the center of the room, a complex array of glowing magical circles hummed with power. And suspended in the very middle of the array was a shattered crystalline core. It was dull and fractured, spitting out pathetic little sparks like a dying insect. My breath caught in my throat. Is that? It is, Alara said, her tone casual, as if discussing the weather. While you're sleeping, you would talk. Mumble words like mission, directive, termination. I hired the best mind mages in the world. I had them sift through the fragments of her nightmares until they could piece together a picture of the parasite living in your soul. I stared at her, horrified and amazed. She had. It was embedded deep within you, a malignant tumor on your spirit, she continued, walking toward the array, her eyes filled with disgust. It took me 3 years and every forbidden text in the royal archives to devise a method to extract it. The word extract hung in the air, clinical and brutal. The process of ripping something out of a person's soul, the danger, the agony, it was unthinkable. One wrong move, and I would have been annihilated forever. When it was free, it begged, Alara said, turning to face me. For the first time in 13 years, a ghost of a genuine, tender smile graced her lips. It offered me everything: power, wealth, immortality. I told it I only wanted you. And then, right in front of me, she lifted a hand and snapped her fingers. The magic circle flared, collapsing inward on the core with a blinding flash of light. When it faded, the core was gone. Not even ash remained. Now, nothing can ever command you to hurt me again, she said, stepping close to straighten the collar of my shirt. Oh, and speaking of loose ends, Prince Arthur, after you fell, he tried to force a marriage, thinking he could absorb the empire in its moment of crisis. She paused, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. I had him and his entire treacherous family exiled to the frozen tundra in the far north. They'll be farming rocks for the rest of their short, miserable lives. She had vanquished all my enemies. She had even slain the god in my head. For me, she had become a devil. A wave of profound terror and a strange, overwhelming sense of awe crashed over me. The system was gone, but I wasn't free. I had merely been transferred from one prison to another. This one, far more beautiful, and infinitely more inescapable. Hashtag, 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 9 the day my strength fully returned. I went to find Alara in the royal study. She was dressed in sharp, black riding leathers, her hair tied back in a severe ponytail that highlighted her regal features. "Your Majesty," I said, bowing. She looked up from her paperwork, and the ice in her expression thawed slightly. "Damien, come here." I didn't move. "Thank you for saving my life, Your Majesty. I am fully recovered." I took a breath, steeling myself. I wished to leave the palace, to travel the continent. The warmth vanished from her face. The air in the room grew heavy, electric. She stared at me for a long moment, and I braced myself for her fury. Instead, she laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Travel?" She set down her quill and rose, gliding toward me. "Damien, you've slept for 13 years. The world is not as you remember it. It's a dangerous place." Her hand came up to cup my cheek. "Let me protect you now, the way you once protected me." Her tone was soft, but the command was absolute. I pushed her hand away. My mind is made up. I turned and walked toward the massive oak doors of the study. Alara didn't try to stop me. I reached the doors, grabbed the heavy iron handle, and pulled. It didn't budge. I tried again, channeling my strength, my muscles straining. Nothing. The door was as immovable as a mountain. It was then I realized that the entire study, the entire palace, was sealed within an invisible, impenetrable magical barrier. It was a cage. A warm body pressed against my back, and Alara's arms wrapped around me. She rested her chin on my shoulder, her voice a poisonous, gentle whisper. "Don't even think about leaving me, Damien. I spent 13 years searching for you. I will not give you a chance to disappear again." I stood rigid as she began to unfasten my plain tunic, her touch methodical, proprietary. She dressed me in fine, white silk, the fabric cool against my skin. Then she produced it, a chain. It was exquisitely crafted from gold and shimmering soul gems, a masterpiece of artifice that glittered with cold, decadent light. She turned me to face her, took my chin in her hand, and locked the collar around my neck. Click! The metal was cool and light, but it felt heavier than a mountain. That same day, she convened the entire royal court. With all her ministers and nobles assembled, she led me by the chain, like a prize won in a war, to the foot of the throne. As the court stared in a mixture of shock, pity, and contempt, she looped the end of the chain around the arm of her massive, obsidian throne. She took her seat, looking down at me where I was forced to kneel beside her. She reached out, her fingers stroking my hair as a benevolent smile played on her lips. "My knight," she said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "You always did enjoy kneeling at my feet." The length of the chain was perfectly measured to allow me to kneel or sit, but never to stand. "From now on, this is the only place you'll ever be." My life as a knight was over. I was now the Empress's pet. Hashtag, 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 10, I became a tourist attraction. The Empress's golden prisoner. Every day, I was tethered to that throne as Alara held court, debated policy, and issued decrees. Every petition passed by my feet. Every minister had to look up to her and down on me. It was a masterclass in psychological torture. I would not break. I rebelled. After court one day, I summoned every ounce of my strength, my restored power roaring through me as I tried to snap the chain with brute force. The muscles in my neck and shoulders corded, veins bulging. The chain, however, didn't even creak. Instead, it seemed to come alive, a parasitic thing that began to drain my energy. I collapsed at the foot of the throne, gasping, defeated. Alara descended from her seat, wearing a simple silk nightgown. She knelt before me, mirroring the way I had once knelt before her at the banquet so long ago. She tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet her gaze. "Don't waste your strength," she murmured, a hint of pity in her voice. "This is the eternal vow, forged from abyssal or enquenched in my own blood. It cannot be broken, not unless I die." I glared at her, spitting out a single word. "This is imprisonment. This is protection," she corrected, her cool fingers tracing the line of the collar at my throat. "When you took that arrow from me, I swore an oath. I would never, ever let anything harm you again." Her protection was a cage. An old, white-haired duke stepped forward, his voice trembling with indignation. "Your Majesty, This man is a relic of a fallen dynasty, an ill omen for the stability of the realm. He should be executed. Illyra's eyes went flat and cold. Without even glancing at the Duke, she spoke. Strip him of his titles. Exile him to the Black Marshes. His family is forbidden from ever setting foot in the capital again. Guards dragged the wailing old man away. The hall fell deathly silent. Message received. So I tried a new tactic, a hunger strike. The first day, she ignored me. The second, she conducted business as usual, as if I were nothing more than a statue. By the third day, I was dizzy with weakness, slumped against the base of her throne. She dismissed the court and brought me a bowl of steaming broth herself. Eat. I turned my head away. She was quiet for a moment. Then, to my utter shock, she took a spoonful herself. Before I could process what was happening, she pinned me, her hand gripping my jaw, and kissed me. Her lips were soft and warm, parting mine, forcing the broth from her mouth into mine. I was too stunned to resist. She pulled back slightly, licking a drop of broth from her lip, a playful, dangerous light in her eyes. My knight, she purred, weren't you always the master of doing one thing, while intending another, of using humiliation as a tool? Her voice dropped to a seductive whisper. Allow me to show you how it's truly done. My rebellion was a joke. Against her absolute power and her suffocating, obsessive love, every struggle only pulled me deeper. Every act of defiance twisted into a new, more intimate form of subjugation. My resolve was beginning to crumble. Hashtag 11-1 morning. For the first time, Illyra did not hold court. She unfastened the chain from her throne, but kept the end of it coiled in her hand. She led me, like a falcon on a leash, to the highest spire of the palace. It had once been the royal observatory. Now it was something else entirely. The moment I stepped inside, the breath left my body. Above us was not a ceiling, but a perfect, magically rendered night sky, glittering with stars. But it wasn't the sky of this world. It was the star chart of my home, the one I'd left behind. How could she possibly know? In your sleep, you would sometimes whisper about a home I'd never heard of. Illyra's voice came from behind me. You describe a sky I'd never seen. I had my court astronomers map it from your dreams. My heart hammered against my ribs. She led me deeper into the vast space. There was a fully equipped knight's training yard, stocked with every weapon imaginable. Beyond it, a massive library filled not with political texts, but with adventure novels, histories of grand heroes, the kinds of books I used to love. But it was the wall opposite the library that shattered me. It was covered, from floor to ceiling, in portraits. All of them were of me. Me in my captain's armor. Me in my civilian clothes. Me sleeping, my face peaceful in a magical slumber. Me smiling, a fleeting expression she must have caught once and immortalized forever. There were hundreds of them, each one a masterpiece of lifelike detail. For the first year after you fell, I painted you every day, she said, her voice quiet. I was so terrified I would forget the exact shade of your eyes. She gestured to the training yard. In the 5th year, I began to learn your style of swordsmanship. I thought if I could fight like you, I could feel you beside me. She picked up a long sword, executing a flawless parry and riposte that was a mirror image of my own. In the 10th year, I built this place. I decided that when you woke up, I would give you a world with no pain, no betrayal, no duty. A world built just for you. She came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her chin on my shoulder. Damien, I made you a world where nothing can ever hurt you again. Her breath was a warm, trembling whisper against my ear. All you have to do is stay. Stay with me. Please. I looked at the stars of my long-lost home. I looked at the walls covered in a decade of devotion and obsession. I looked at the monument she had built to her 13-year, all-consuming love. And the last wall around my heart, the one I had built of pride and defiance, crumbled into dust. She had become an empress for me. She had become a monster for me. I turned in her arms, and for the first time, I embraced her, holding her so tightly I could feel the frantic beat of her heart against my chest. I buried my face in the crook of her neck, breathing in her scent. What if? My voice was a raw, broken thing. What if I had never woken up? She laughed softly against my ear, a sound that held the terrifying promise of Armageddon. then I would have made this entire continent your tomb. I closed my eyes. This golden cage wasn't a prison. It was a crown, woven for me from all the thorns in the world and all the love in her heart. Hashtag 12. I embraced my new reality. The Empress's night. The prisoner of the throne. I sat by her side as she governed, listening as she sparred with her ministers. Sometimes she would pass me a difficult decree and ask for my counsel. I would give it, and she would always listen. We found a strange, symbiotic rhythm. She was my master and my student. I was her captive and her advisor. The chain was no longer an instrument of shame, but a symbol of our connection, a declaration to the world. And then, one day, the last remnants of the old noble houses made their final, desperate move. A brainwashed fanatic, disguised as a royal messenger, gained audience. When he was mere feet from the throne, he tore open his tunic, revealing a massive, pulsating alchemical bomb strapped to his chest. It happened in a heartbeat. No one could have reacted in time. Alara, I roared. The chain. It held me fast. I couldn't throw myself in front of her as I had 13 years ago. In that split second, I made the only choice I had. I yanked on the collar around my neck with all my might. The chain went taut, pulling Alara from her throne. She cried out, tumbling from the dais and directly into my waiting arms. I wrapped myself around her, twisting and rolling just as the world erupted in fire and thunder. Boom! The force of the blast threw us across the floor. I shielded her with my body, my back taking the brunt of the shrapnel and searing heat. The pain was immense, but she was safe in my embrace. Just like 13 years ago, when the smoke cleared, the assassin was vaporized, and half the obsidian throne was gone. The royal guard swarmed in, their faces pale with shock. Alara pushed herself up from my chest, completely unharmed. She looked at me, her deep eyes shimmering with tears of relief, but also with a wild, almost ecstatic joy. "You still protect me," she whispered, her voice trembling with absolute certainty. I looked up at her and smiled. Yes, no matter what else changed, that never would. I reached up, grabbed the golden chain connecting us, and pulled. The distance between us vanished. Our noses were almost touching. My Empress. I breathed against her lips, my voice for her alone. "This leash, it's too long." And then I kissed her. She froze for an instant, then melted against me, kissing me back with a desperate, passionate fury that had been caged for 13 years. There, in the ruins of her throne room, under the shocked gazes of her entire court, the knight kissed his Empress. The prisoner kissed his jailer, and our story finally, truly began.